I reported on a very important statement from Reem Alsalem, the UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls, that absolutely hit the nail on the head when it comes to the way women are being silenced for simply defending their sex-based rights. Now, normally, you know this, a statement from the UN would, and referencing Australia, of course, would be wall-to-wall coverage here, but funnily enough, this one barely rated a mention. Perhaps her view doesn't conform with the narrative, who knows? As Alsalem said in her statement, and let's remember, she's a UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls, she said, "I am concerned by the shrinking space in several countries for women and feminist organisations and their allies to gather and express themselves peacefully in demanding respect." She went on, "I am disturbed by the frequent tactics of smear campaigns against women and their allies on the basis of their beliefs, branding them Nazis or extremists, and a means of attack and intimidation with the purpose," she says, "of deferring women from speaking." I'm very pleased to say the UN Special Rapporteur, Reem Alsalem, joins me now. Reem, welcome to the program. I really appreciate your time. I think this is such a critical issue. I want to start with Moira Deeming before we move on to the broader issues that you've talked about in your statement. What was it in the way that Moira was treated that really stood out to you?
Well, first of all, Peta, thank you for having me and spotlighting also the statement. You may have noticed, actually, that the statement does not mention any country specifically or name any woman that has been subjected to this situation. However, I am, of course, aware of Mrs. Deeming's situation and what she has experienced. And, of course, understand that the statement I made can be seen and can be interpreted as relevant to her own experience and covering it. As it can, of course, also apply to many other situations around the globe. You see that I specifically mentioned countries in the global north, so that would include Australia and New Zealand. So to come to your question, what really stood out for me is that she appears to have been unfairly called a Nazi, precisely for expressing her views and also her concerns regarding the rights of women associated with gender, sex, and gender identity, and has also been on those, therefore, allegations or grounds expelled from the Victorian Liberal Party. I haven't seen that there has been a proper investigation into these allegations before she was dismissed. So there are concerns about due process. And I understand that, you know, there are some Nazis or persons with right-wing views, extreme right-wing views may have shown up. But again, where's the evidence that she invited them or that she has expressed support for them?
Why are we in this situation, Reem, do you think, that the difficulty women have, and they're not speaking out against trans rights, they're just trying to defend long-held women's rights and single-sex spaces for women and girls? Why have we got into this recent sort of collision between these two groups, and why is it that women are being silenced for just raising our voice very reasonably on these issues?
Yeah, so I think, like in any situation involving the rights of different groups, there is always a tension of rights between groups. And it's part of our jobs, whether politicians or actually human rights experts like myself or, you know, even academics, to have a conversation, a constructive, non-violent conversation about how to resolve these tensions. And so these conversations must be had. So what has happened, I think, is when a small group, and I do believe that it's a small group of radical trans persons and their allies with certain views on the scope of gender identity, come and are loud and intimidate and threaten or use violence in an attempt to not only just control the narrative, but also, you know, shut down any debate, claiming wrongly, I would say, that they represent the wider trans community, which they don't. Then we end up in a situation where we can't have this debate. And of course, it's very convenient then to brush everybody with the stroke of calling them Nazi, bigot, genocidaire. It's a convenient tactic We've seen it used in other situations. It serves as a green light, really, to say that you should hate the group that is being smeared, or the individuals. You should despise them. They have nothing to contribute. Their issues are trivial. And therefore, that closes really the door on any meaningful engagement and lets them get away with it.
What about acts of physical intimidation? I mean, we know that Moira lost her position inside the Liberal Party room, but we saw protesters storm a lecture at Oxford University by feminist academic Kathleen Stock just the other day. I mean, is the physical intimidation becoming more common?
Physical intimidation is becoming more common. It's also being more normalized. In fact, more than the physical intimidation, I'm also concerned about other forms of intimidation and harassment, especially those perpetrated online. There are threats of threats against lives of persons, of women that speak out. There's so much relentless campaigning that it also affects their psychological well-being. They feel isolated. They feel marginalized. They are deplatformed. In a way, I think it's become so common, this experience, that it has eventually reached me. I've had women and women organizations from across the globe, but particularly the Global North, again, writing to me about this issue. And as the Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women, I am mandated to intervene and speak out on trends when it comes to situations of violence or individual cases. So this is what I've done. And what is also noteworthy is that the way governments and law enforcement have reacted, I mean, it varies, but generally there has been no reaction, timid at best. Sometimes they have even supported, aided, abetted, condoned these acts of violence against women by not taking sufficient measures, by not speaking out against them, by not dealing with them. And it's problematic, of course, because it threatens a number of fundamental human rights of these women, like their freedom of expression, thought, belief, physical security, even the right to live free from violence. But also it threatens women's participation in society. It threatens their ability to participate in political life, to speak their mind. And ultimately, this is not good for the prosperity and development of any society.